Hi everyone, I hope you all had a nice lunch. I'm very excited for this next session because it's with the CCJLA, who Island Innovation have very proudly brought to Dubai to share their stories with you. So I'd like to invite Stacey up on stage to moderate a session about inclusive climate action. Thank you, Stacey.
Hey, thanks everyone. Thanks for the awesome energy. So as we all know, I am the partnership manager. I am the lead facilitator of the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy, or as we affectionately now call it, the CCJLA. So this session today is going to be focusing on the young people, some of the young people that we brought to Dubai. And this was a program that was funded by Open Society Foundations, and we have to give our hearty thanks to them. And it's a groundbreaking program which has in fact provided a platform to encourage knowledge sharing through curated sessions hosted by expert practitioners in the field of climate justice and climate change. So we had 39 young participants who were selected from hundreds of applicants, and we've been able to cultivate amongst these 39 a really awesome network of like-minded, dedicated individuals. These young people have also interacted with each other and sparked a sense of motivation and far-reaching passion to ensure that their vision for a brighter future is taken to the next level. Now, of these 39, we had 10 who were chosen to participate in a fully funded experience of COP28, and 5 of those 10 are here today to share their experiences, which I know have been characterized as life-changing. So I'd like to invite our panelists up on the stage to join me, please. So for this panel discussion today, we are welcoming Yemi Knight from Barbados. We have Dejay Lyons from the Cayman Islands, also Lisana Dyer from Dominica, Carice Elliott from St. Kitts and Nevis, and Riddy Samtini of St. Martin. So they will all be discussing various aspects of advancing inclusive climate action. And I'll let everybody take a turn and say a bit about themselves, or a lot about themselves, because we really are here to learn about their story and their purpose and some of the projects that they're organizing. So we'll start from this end over here and we will go along. So Carice, over to you from St. Kitts and Nevis.
Hi everyone, I really thought I was going to go last. But my name is Carice Elliott. I'm from the Twin Island Federation state of St. Kitts and Nevis. We're in the Caribbean. Nevis is 36 square miles and St. Kitts is 96 square miles. So what I am here to speak about is sustainable fashion. I am a fashion designer. I have a business called Impressive Designs, but the sustainable aspect of it, the other business is Clutched. And it's a case where I use materials from different tailors, seamstresses, different cloth stores to create bags. So it's basically just reducing, reusing, and recycling, but in a fashionable way. And what I can say is I did not know I was venturing into sustainable fashion. Before CCJLA, I did feel a bit lost in terms of my sense of direction. But I can say that the Academy did assist me, and Ari as well, because she told me it was sustainable fashion. But the Academy did assist me in terms of finding what my routes would be or what my future journey would be. So I'm really grateful to the Academy for that. In terms of sustainable fashion, there was a speaker before, and she made me really emotional because it's very enlightening to see the different path that she took in looking at climate change. You know, we always hear about renewable energy, we always hear about biodiversity, but we don't hear about sustainable fashion. And it's a case where, you know, we're a very minute sector, especially at COP, we're very, very minute. We had literally 3 sessions at COP, and COP is like 2 weeks long. So it's a case where, you know, I do feel like I did not find my space here. But in speaking to other persons, you know, climate change has a lot to do with a holistic view. So it's not just biodiversity, it's not just renewable energy, it's not just sustainable fashion. It also has a lot to do with mental health as well, and arts as well, and how we can, you know, join all of them together and see how best we can look at climate justice on a holistic view, but also for SIDS. So yes, that's my brief introduction.
Thanks so much. So we'll hand the mic over to Yemi Knight of Barbados to just give a few details about themselves and their projects.
All right, hi everyone. I'm Yemi Knight from Barbados, and I recently started, within the last 3 years, I started my own NGO called Anchor Bridge. I created this NGO because I found that the justice aspect was missing from all the climate discussions, and so my NGO focuses primarily on climate justice, educating the youth, and trying to encourage citizen participation. And so we've done a myriad of projects, very small. It's just me and one other person who does this work. Barbados recently became a republic nation, and so therefore we've been engaged in constitution reform. And I work to have environmental provisions included in our Constitution and Charter of Rights, but I also work to have LGBTQ inclusions in our Charter of Rights also. And we successfully got sexual orientation as a protection in our the Charter of Barbados, and we're currently speaking with policymakers, stakeholders, and all interesting parties to have it included in our Constitution, along with comprehensive environmental provisions, because Barbados currently doesn't have environmental provisions in our Constitution. Another thing I recently did was partner with the IOM to include SOGIES safeguards in disaster planning, and that was an interesting experience because we recognize that if there's no protections in general laws and policies, then in a crisis event, those issues can be further exacerbated. What else have I done? We also have a water scarcity issue in Barbados. We have water scarcity and water quality issues, but we found that the public didn't have readily available access to information. So people in the most northern part of the island has been consuming brown water. Some people say for 5, some people say for 20 years, but they have no clue what they're ingesting. And so what I did, I took it upon myself to do independent water testing. This is because our country is of the opinion that the public shouldn't have access to water quality data. And so in the next year or so, I'll have results from that pilot study so we can actually tell people what's in their water, and then we can make plans to increase or have more robust policies around water scarcity and water access to information and data. I'll say one last thing. I would also like to eventually work with all the people up here to create a coalition where we tackle all of these issues on a regional-wide perspective. Things such as the Escazio Agreement that would help with citizen participation, access to data, all these things are quite important. So I know that I said I speak primarily on justice, but I'm really, really interested in policy reform because I believe policy reform works in tandem with social justice change movements. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. No one feel pressure to stop. This is your moment, and you'll have many moments after this, so it's great to hear from you. Go ahead, Ridi.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here with my amazing cohort led by Stacy. So my name is Riddhi Samtani, and I'm from the beautiful island of St. Martin. The island is actually the smallest entity in the world to be shared by 2 different European member states. The northern half is part of France, and the southern half is Dutch. However, the constitutional statuses of both sides are actually different. I'm actually here with an amazing representation from the Dutch Caribbean. So on the Dutch side, or the Kingdom of the Netherlands, primarily consists of 6 different islands. Aruba, Bonaire, Curacao, Sint Maarten, Saba, and Statia. And this year with the CGLA cohort, we have representation from Aruba, Curacao, and Sint Maarten, the largest Dutch Caribbean youth delegation ever to come to COP. So for me, this is a really proud moment. I got to meet some amazing young people from my own, my sister islands. So what do I do and who am I? I feel like I wear a lot of hats. I started as a conservationist for trash-free waters because growing up, our beaches was of primary importance. And then that really led me to organizing, right? Organizing beach cleanups and being able to understand policy reform from a very local and localized aspect. But having been successful in working with governments to really tackle this trash and littering issue, I understood bigger concepts like climate change, marine biodiversity protections, terrestrial land-based protections, and the importance of our nature. And today I work primarily under the umbrella of the biggest threat that all of us face, which is climate change. A small island developing states, we all are sitting here because we are all just as vulnerable to changes in a sea level rise, a warming temperature, and severe and intense superstorms. So I work across climate. I work as an environmental specialist on climate adaptation and mitigation projects. And one of the projects that I'm really proud of doing is with funding in a trust fund from the Netherlands after Hurricane Irma, we were able to work on expanding our sewer networks, increasing water storage capacity for, from 0.7 days to 1.7 days, so almost doubling that. Increasing our sewer networks not only increases our water storage capacity for sanitation, but also the reduction of sewage and runoff going into our main bodies of water. So that's been really powerful. On the organizing side, I started a 1-year-long project called Why Do We Litter St. Martin? That was really a data collection project to collect quantitative and qualitative data on why people litter. And it was really empowering to work with communities, to understand community-based action and community engagement. And one of the things that I'm very interested in right now is action for youth empowerment. I think that youth have an incredibly powerful voice, and I am now trying to, like Yemi said, work with this cohort to really organize ourselves, write statements, declarations, and really use our voice through different tools and mechanisms to create change. So, thank you.
Thanks very much, Ridi. And I think what's coming out a lot so far is the importance of data, the importance of collaboration as well, and the importance of just having this kind of network for each other. So, on to Dejay from...
Hi everyone, I'm Dejay Lyons from the Cayman Islands, and I'm an environmental activist and advocate because there's a difference between those two things. So for me, my journey actually started a couple of years ago when I started off as a youth ambassador for a grassroots organization in the Cayman Islands called Plastic Free Cayman. And from there, they gave me the opportunity to do an ocean conservation camp in Vancouver with 2 organizations called Captain Planet Foundation and Lonely Whale. During that time, I actually had the opportunity to write a proposal about a campaign that we would be able to take home with us, and it was actually surrounded by mangroves. And we were finalists, and it was amazing. Then we came home and we found that one of our youth-led organizations was actually left without leaders because the leaders were going to pursue other academic endeavors, whether it was university or performing arts school, whatever you have it. And so then they asked myself and my partner, Ben Somerville, if we wanted to be the leaders of the youth-led organization called Protect Our Future. So I was the vice president of Protect Our Future for 2 years, and during those 2 years was an amazing experience filled with environmental conservation of the Cayman Islands. So one of the biggest projects that we focused on during my tenancy was actually lobbying against the proposed cruise birthing facility that was going to be built in the Cayman Islands. For us, it was really important to go and question that project because the way it was being proposed to be built would have damaged not only our environment, but our economy, including our tourism industry, which is 20 to 25% of our GDP. So we held protests, we had the opportunity to speak to some of the biggest cruise execs in the world, and we had a seat at the table. And I can say that we were successful in our quest, and the cruise birthing facility was not built. After that, we went on to do many campaigns surrounding single-use plastic, seagrass beds, you name it, and we probably had done it. But during that time, it made me realize I actually wanted to turn this into my career. So right now, I'm actually in school at Basketball University studying global development and sustainability. And right now I'm actually also in my placement year. So during my placement year, it's a study abroad year. And I actually had the opportunity to go back home. So I'm working with, or I did work with the Ministry of Sustainability and Climate Resiliency in my island. And I had the opportunity to have exposure to the different policies that are being made in my island, including the climate change policy that is underway of being implemented, which is such an exciting thing. It was originally drafted in 2012, but now with our new government and the Ministry of Sustainability, we're having an opportunity to update it and put it into action. So it's been a really exciting time for me. I'm trying to be short and sweet. Yeah, and I'm on more than that. I'm also a writer, so I write for a magazine called Awake, which is a youth-led magazine. The writers that are on it are actually all around the world, from Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, Europe, you name it, we're there. And we tell different stories about climate justice, climate crisis, plastic pollution, and we just share about our stories, but also stories of people around the world who are doing amazing things and also underrepresented voices. So that's a little bit about me, and I'm really excited to get into this discussion. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Jay. Okay, we'll move on to Lisana and Dominica.
Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I am Lisana Dyer, an environmentalist from the Commonwealth of Dominica. It's a pleasure to be here with my fellow colleagues. This has truly been a journey during the academy where I get to discuss and have conversations with like-minded individuals within the same region, the Caribbean region. It's very seldom that you see that, especially in an area of climate justice. So I'm from the small island, small developing state, Dominica. And we are a very vulnerable country when it comes to the impacts of climate change. I have dabbled in a bit of research in areas of environmental diplomacy, project coordination, etc. But really and truly, my purpose here at COP for this year is to really share awareness, educate, and let persons be aware of how the climate change impacts Dominica specifically. Because of our unique circumstances, such as our location and our history, and even the indigenous population that we have, the impacts of climate change drastically affects us. I'm sure by now, if you're really in tune with the small island developing states, you would have heard that we've had a number of extreme weather events that has passed our way over the recent years, to include hurricanes, storms, which subsequently bring across mass movement, flooding, rivering, coastal, flash flooding, and the impacts that it have on the island, not just on our terrestrial environment and marine environment, but on the people, on the island. And Dominica is made up of 75% forest, so you could imagine the amount of biodiversity that's on that island and the impacts on that biodiversity from the extreme weather events. So with Hurricane Maria in 2017, that 75% forest and all its rich biodiversity was completely flattened, completely destroyed, along with our infrastructure, houses, bridges, etc., in a matter of 5 hours. And the people of Dominica, the public sector, private sector together, had to get up that morning and figure out how we're going to rebuild this community. And first of all, how we're going to get over this anxiety, this mental health that we had to deal with. Because it can be really traumatizing, and persons are still traumatized up to a day like today. And these are the type of impacts that we face. Persons concentrate a lot on the broken infrastructure, but really the mental health is something that we should really focus on and shed more light on. And that's why I was very intrigued when I saw the Caribbean Climate Justice Academy And I made it my point of duty to join and to share my experience and just have that space where we could discuss and converse. And that's really my project, sharing knowledge and educating on what I've been through, what my people have been through, and what we continue to go through. I don't think persons realize that the hurricane season is an annual season. A Category 5 could hit this year, it could hit next year, it could hit the next year and the next year. Every year, the government and the private sector has to look for funding, has to look for ways, for avenues to rebuild the country. We'll always be in debt. And these are the different areas or the subsections under the impacts of climate change: the mental health, the debt, the environment, the people, that really comes together and really shows that this is a huge issue that should be dealt with. So I don't want to prolong. I get a little passionate when I start. So I will just say that I make it my point of duty to join forces, to create avenues, join avenues and platforms where I can share my story and my country's story. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Susanna. We appreciate this. Trust me, we want to hear. We want to hear all of your stories. So I'm going to launch into questions, and with these questions, anyone can answer. Just indicate, you have the mic and go ahead. So my first question has to do with a collaborative approach to further advancing inclusive climate action. What role do you think a collaborative approach can play in this?
Hello. Yeah, so I think one of the main topics we've all been talking about is this collaborative approach. I think that, as Lasana touched on, we haven't felt like we had a space as young people from the entire region of the Caribbean to come and talk about climate change issues, share our own personal traumas of how climate change has impacted us. I deeply, deeply resonate with Lasana's story because Hurricane Irma hit Dominica, but Hurricane Maria hit Dominica, but Hurricane Irma hit St. Martin, which is the country that I came from. And we also experienced 95% of complete devastation and destruction. So that feeling of you're not alone, I have this shared experience. What can we do together with this shared experience to not only support each other in that mental space, but also innovate together on how do we share our story as a region. We see the Caribbean as this geopolitical division, right? There are the Dutch islands, the French islands, there are sovereign islands of CARICOM, and that has prevented us from having a voice. One of the topics that has come out of this discussion amongst all of us really is, why has the Pacific movement for climate change been so powerful? And that really is because they've gotten together as a region to have solidarity and have a common voice. But we're not seeing that in the Caribbean. We're seeing that there is a powerful voice, but those voices are fragmented. And this is what we're here to do, because in this platform, we're really just finding solidarity, finding these common interests, and we're hyping up each other to really figure out how do we join all of our voices and what does that look like. So collaboration, I think, is something that is so important of climate action and inclusivity. And that is what, I think from the youth-led perspective, because when we talk about inclusivity, youth often get left out and do not have a seat at the table. And so we're here trying to institutionalize our voices. And the CGLA platform has been an amazing avenue for us to feel institutionalized, for us to have this space that we're sitting in to share our story. And I really don't feel like I'm only here from St. Martin. I feel like I'm here from the Caribbean. I really do. And so that's kind of my take on it. I'll pass the mic to Carice.
Well, how do I go after that, really? I mean, you basically spoke about everything. But what I can say in terms of collaboration, I do agree with you in terms of, feeling like we have a space in terms of CCJLA and in terms of COP as well, because you're at home and you think, okay, I'm going through this by myself. There's no one else on my island who's going through the exact same thing. But then you come to COP, or you have opportunities such as CCJLA, and it's like, I'm in St. Kitts and Nevis, Lisana is in Dominica. We're literally experiencing the same thing. And, you know, it doesn't have to be in terms of collaboration. It doesn't have to be internal. It can always be external as well. And so I think that CCJLA afforded us the opportunity to look at other options for inclusivity, but also collaboration. And once again, I would just like to say thank you. I don't think we can say thank you enough for the opportunity that you afforded us to come to COP, but also meet each other in person and get that face-to-face knowledge or face-to-face feeling in terms of you're not alone. You have people. You have literally a community. So thank you so much again.
Well, thanks for that. Anyone else want to talk about collaboration? Well, we have another question that is closely aligned. So we talked about collaboration, and we mentioned it on more of an individual level here in the CCJLA. But I wanted to talk a little bit about policy, because we know policies are the real things that have an impact on our lives in the region. And I wondered if any of you wanted to give your take on how can we ensure that climate policy is in fact inclusive?
I guess I'll go first. I just want to start by saying that humans discriminate, but climate change doesn't. And in the Caribbean, we have a shared history of colonization, which has left very discriminatory policies. In most Caribbean islands, we have this thing called the Savings Law Clause, which maintained laws prior to individual independence. And those laws have things such as wandering laws, which is if black children were outside after dark, they could be rounded up and taken to like a government industrial school, right? Those Savings Law Clause have laws that discriminate against women's rights. They have laws that discriminate against differently able people. Within our Constitution and within some of our laws, we have the word idiot in them to describe people who have mental health challenges. And these are things that humans do. We're discriminating. And like I said, climate change doesn't. So when a hurricane comes, it's not saying, oh, I'm going to go to Barbados, or, you know what I mean? It's going to impact each country, and it's going to impact each individual equally. So why don't we have progressive laws? Another thing that limits our participation, and I like that the Jay mentioned protesting. A lot of Caribbean islands had protesting in the 60s. I don't want to misquote, but there's this guy named Clement Payne who did a riot in Bridgetown. And after that riot, Barbados increased its protesting laws, so you have to get a permit to protest. Why should I get a permit to protest against institutions that are impacting me, right? And I'm saying all this to say that there are laws that exist that may not explicitly relate to climate change, but do impact it. Climate change is a holistic problem. Things that you may not consider, you need to consider as it pertains to climate change. Things such as gender-based violence, the protection of youth. In St. Vincent, when the ashfall fell, a lot of women did not go to shelters because they were afraid of being assaulted, right? So these are real things. That is a climate change issue, but a gender-based issue. How do I close off this? We have to have robust policy change holistically, then, or in tandem with climate policy change and reformation. And it is then that we can really tackle the climate change issue and the environmental degradation issue holistically. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Yes, go ahead. I see you.
I just want to chime in on what Yemi was saying. With regards to the policies, it really starts on I should say that local governments, etc., base their policies on the international environmental law. And the international environmental law starts here at COP28, where we are negotiating and we put together our draft text, and countries who are, of course, signed to the Paris Agreement abide by those legislations, and though it trickles down to the local level. So what I'm saying is that it's really here at COP, we really need to ensure that these legislation is really inclusive of all the elements that are important to persons on the ground, such as the gender, vulnerable communities, marginalized communities, etc. So I think that developing states should really understand the point of view from the different regions, the different countries, races, ethnicity, and ensure that it is inclusive so that when we trickle it down on the local level, then we know that the policy can really be something that reflects inclusiveness.
I'm just going to pick up on this really quickly. So with me having experience with the Ministry of Sustainability, I actually know a lot of the processes that happen in the Cayman Islands in order to make policy. So in this case, I'm going to use Cayman as a case study. With the climate change policy in the Cayman Islands, in order to make sure that people's voices were being heard, there was a lot of steps that were taken before and after to make sure that when this policy does come out, that it is representative of our island and our goals and where we want to go. So that would include public consultation timings where the public can come out and express their views on what the draft climate change policy is or how they feel about it or the amendments they think we should make or even down to the layout if things were confusing. So those they had in person. They also had surveys where people could go online on the government website and put their input on there. On top of that, there's steering committees that include different businesses and stakeholders that would be involved and either dictate or contribute to climate change and how those businesses will be able to assimilate and help progress the climate change policy of the Cayman Islands. So I think inclusivity in terms of policy is really more so, like everyone's been saying, is on the ground, but there's processes that can be taken that can ensure that we're actually successful in that quest. So I don't know where everyone else's countries are in terms of that, but if that resonates with anybody, then you need to go back to your governments and make sure that, you know, people have their opinion in these policies. If there's not public consultation periods, if there's not stakeholders or steering committees, then the policies are not going to be fully representative of what your countries are trying to do and where they're trying to go. And that, in that effect, can be an unsuccessful policy and lead to the goals being neglected in the end. So, yeah.
Thanks for mentioning that aspect of public participation. I know that is something that does occur in Barbados. One of the issues we face, however, is that is a lack of participation. Yeah. Because often the public participation isn't really publicized the way it should be on the various government websites. So that is something that you have to be an actively engaged and inquisitive citizen and look for these notices, look for things which are posted in the newspaper, which I can say maybe of my generation would read, but you don't necessarily see that as a way to really include young people. So thanks for raising that. Did you have something to add, Riddhi?
No, I just wanted to highlight that it's so important to have these systems and democratic tools put in place in order to engage meaningfully with the public, but indeed it is the lack of access to transparency, education, and understanding why people should participate. I think that is such a big part of the problem. And it's a systemic issue because systems of justice only work where you have the operational pillars and where those justice systems and democratic tools are actually held accountable, right? Otherwise, you can write a litigation paper, you can go and write a petition, and you can protest, but that won't really go anywhere, and you won't really understand. And that because of this mistrust and lack of accountability, public participation, people then get discouraged from even making the effort in the first place. And so I think that there's a combination here. It's to have the systems in place, but then also to you know, some people don't have access to online surveys, and then that requires capacity to go into communities to explain people why they should, and that is exhausting. And everyone forgets about that. Who is going to do that? It needs to be a government priority. And unfortunately, even though we are so prone by changes to climate, somehow or the other, it's not prioritized, right? You need that manpower, that capacity to go into the communities, engage the most vulnerable people. You need to have someone who's dedicated enough with the patience to go talk to a disenfranchised old man or a woman or even just a child, right, who just doesn't want to participate. So this issue of inclusivity it's almost like a wicked problem, because you start somewhere and then you're like, oh wait, but I need this, and then that, and so I think dialogue here, talking about it, helps. And so this is awesome points. Just wanted to add.
Yeah, definitely. And I like that you alluded to the complexity of the problem. Once you do start to delve into it, you have to be prepared to really get into the trenches and deal with it properly. And the aspect of education, I really love we brought that up, because, I mean, my heart soared when Yemi talked about savings law clauses, because that harkens back to when I did my law degree. We talk about levels of entrenchment of clauses in a constitution. And we know that it isn't that easy to change. It's possible, but unless you know what you're working with from the beginning and are aware of these various intricacies, then you're kind of doomed to suffering. But education can change all that. So thanks for showing us that, Yemi. We appreciate that. Okay, so I have another question, and please feel free to talk about this, because I know each of you have had a different experience. I wanted to ask, what is the most resonant lesson that you've learned from COP so far, whether it be there in the blue zone, the green zone, here, interacting, and I want you to really let us know, what do you think is something you'll take away from all this that you'll keep using in the future?
Well, for me, what I can say is that from COP28, it has a lot to do with what we just spoke about in terms of awareness and climate education. So we're saying, we want persons to join us in the fight against climate change. We want persons to know that what they're doing is wrong. However, we don't have any climate education, well, at least for St. Kitts and Nevis, and I think Dominica as well. We don't have that unless someone decides, okay, let me go and see, what is climate change, and then they go right down into a rabbit hole. So it's a case where, climate education is something that is needed, specifically in the small island developing states, because we are mostly affected. But it's also a case where you have to look at the other side of things. Persons are going through other things as well. So we can say, hey, let's educate people, let's look at climate education, let's look at inclusivity. But then persons wouldn't want to look at that if they don't know when their next meal is coming, if they can't pay their rent, if they can't pay, their light bills, if they're pregnant and, they can't afford insurance or something like that. So it's a double-edged sword, and it's a case where, we have to look at things holistically, which is what we were speaking about and what other events are speaking about. We have to take a holistic approach towards climate change. We're speaking about the environment, we're speaking about renewable energy, we're speaking about biodiversity, but we also have to look at mental health. Do they have the capacity to understand what is happening? Do they have the capacity to say, hey, in the next 5 years, we are not going to have any beaches, we're not going to have any, trees? Do they have the capacity to understand that? So to recapitulate, what COP28 has taught me is there needs to be more awareness locally, specifically in St. Kitts and Nevis. There definitely needs to be more awareness, and there also needs to be climate education. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Yemi, over to you. Okay, over to whoever would like to go next.
Okay, I'll go. So I think a COP28 so far, I see that the consistency with the public awareness and sharing the knowledge has been bringing about a little bit of progress. Not as much as we would hope, but I do feel like if we continue to come together and we share these spaces and we dive into what's new, what's happening, the contemporary issues, then I feel that little by little we will really reach to a point that we're satisfied with when it comes to the climate change issues. So I feel like we should not lose hope. We should continue to engage within these conferences and go on with the literature and just ensure that, persons are aware of what's happening. So that's my take on it.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rudy. Your floor is yours. Or Deshay?
For me, COP28 has been interesting. So I'm going to, I guess, touch more so on, I think, 3 basic points, but I'll make it quick. So the first point is we have to be very conscious of the language and linguistics that we're using within this space. So one of the first things that we actually learned about was that I don't really like using SIDS or small island developing states. I prefer large ocean states, and we learned that from Miss Stacy, the one and only. And another one that we actually learned from Mia Motley or Honorable Mia Motley, in the opening of her pavilion was, instead of using climate change, you use climate crisis. Because if you're using climate change, you're acting as if it's not happening now, because we're already in it, we're in the depths of it. So those are 2 key ones that have really stuck with me and have become a part of my own vocabulary, and I encourage that with you all today as well. The second thing is the interconnectedness of various different groups. So for instance, Riddy and I are both from 2 different overseas territories. She's from a Dutch overseas territory. I'm from a UK overseas territory. But a lot of the experiences that we have, we can share together and understand it, whether that's the difficulty to access certain funds like the Loss and Damage Fund because of being an overseas territory. Our member state is the one who's signing on for us on different treaties or different international policies. So we fall underneath that, and sometimes it's hard for the trickle-down effect to get to the overseas territories. It's been something that all 4 of the OTs that are in our delegation have been constantly speaking about, and hopefully with the collaboration that we're undertaking, there's going to be some good projects and campaigns to come out of that. So I'm really excited for that. And I think the third and final thing is that we really just need to listen to each other more. I find that if someone is not a part of your community or something you don't understand or something you may not even identify yourself with, sometimes you don't get the message. So for instance, the other night, some of the delegates and I had the opportunity to attend an event called, it was about the ocean at Night, I think the event was called. And at this event included a roundtable or a panel just like this that included indigenous peoples from all around the world. And they had all different things to say. They were different religions, different backgrounds, but everything that they said almost came out to the same message. And obviously, specifically this night, we were talking about oceans, and oceans is life. It's life for everyone. It's what we breathe, it's what we eat, it's what we drink, it's this room, and it's things that you might not be able to see or hear or think about immediately, but it's real. And me being there, I'm not from an indigenous background, but to me it made sense, everything that they said, and that messaging to me was important, even though those are not people that I see on a daily basis. So I think we really need to start listening to each other and not looking at someone for who they are, but rather what they're saying, and take those lessons with you throughout your life, because you never know where it'll get you. So that's what I've learned at COP28. So I'm really grateful for the experience.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't mind sharing my takeaway too. I think I just wanted to sit and listen, which is why I was kind of passing the mic around. I love hearing what my amazing colleagues here have to say, because I deeply resonate with everything they've said. For me, this experience has been so different from my last. I really don't take that for granted. I didn't have a delegation last year, and this year coming with a delegation and also just taking it in and knowing what is my message. And my message this year really was to build regional cooperation in the Caribbean region, specifically amongst youth. One of the barriers to mobilizing, having an effective voice, really was the geopolitical divides that fragment the Caribbean. I really didn't understand why it was so hard to connect with someone from Cayman. Why do I have to come all the way to Dubai to meet someone from Barbados, a young climate activist from Barbados, from St. Kitts and Nevis? I mean, we are literally in the same region. And so that's why sometimes I'm very conflicted with COP, because it is a place of gathering, it is a place of coalition building, information sharing, knowledge. But it also means it takes a whole 31 hours, especially from the Caribbean, to do that and to facilitate that. And while I'm here, I am trying to build very much regional cooperation and coalition building within the Caribbean region with the overseas countries and territories. And one of the things we've been really talking about that's come out of COP is we're seeing in the global north all these declarations of young people making statements, making their demands. And I think it's time that Caribbean youth start saying the same thing, huh? And I really want us to gather our voices together collectively and make a statement to the world that Caribbean youth are here, we are affected, and we're here to really look at partnerships and collaborations to think of us as global citizens of the world. We talked about this one instance, that deforestation in Brazil and the African Sahara dust, that causes algal blooms in the ocean. And what that brings to us is sargassum on our shorelines. That is a climate change, a symptom of climate change. Can you imagine an event happening in Brazil and in Africa is then affecting us in the Caribbean region? That is just one example of how our actions are affecting each other. And we really need to have more young people connected and globalized, and that's really been my main message from COP. So yeah, it's been an awesome experience.
Thank you. Yemi, over to you.
My intervention isn't regarding COP, but more so a call to action to any parliamentarians and politicians listening. Climate change, human rights issues, environmental issues is not a partisan issue, it's a human issue. And so we have to overcome or let go of ego. The humans suffering don't care about who's in power. They really just care that policies are in place to protect them, and they also care that their politicians care about them. And so I just think that we need to move away from the ego and move away from partisan participation or partisan initiative building, and just stick to caring about human beings. And that's the baseline.
Thank you all so very much. So I loved everything about this this cohort this year. I loved all of the young people. I love your focus on the power of youth. And I'll say from an intergenerational perspective, and definitely by far the oldest person on this stage, everybody, all of these young people, I have learned so much. I have been so inspired. So the call to action I want to also have and lead to you all is, let's build some bridges of intergenerational collaboration and connection, because those really are going to have the power, I think, to keep the momentum going and to change everything. So on that note, I would like to thank so much our amazing youth delegates from the Caribbean Climate Justice Leaders Academy, Carice, Yemi, Riddy, Dejay, Lizana. Thank you all so much. My heart is just so full from knowing you all. So thanks again, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Stacy.